What's up, guys? I just want to give a quick heads up. This is a deeper topic than usually we do at the podcast here. We go in about domestic violence and its effects on kids. So if topics like that are hard for you to listen to, listen to this because it is so important for this information to get out. Big thanks to Bree again. Really enjoyed working on this with you. So enjoy, guys.
I never drink tea, but it was so good. And then I got this pesto avocado toast.
Yo, the
God,
there are the best.
It was honestly so good.
How you feeling now? You feeling a little bit better? Just a tad bit. All right, guys, ladies and gentlemen, going straight into it. Welcome to the Ayoo Chill podcast. Today, we got an amazing guest for you. Her name is Briana Amico. I've known her since high school. You could go ahead and take a couple minutes, seconds, and introduce yourself to the people. Let them know what you do.
Hey, everyone. My name is Briana Amico. Currently, I just graduated college on Monday.
Congratulations.
Thank
Snaps
you.
for you, snaps.
Thank you. So I graduated from Rutgers with a degree in criminal justice and a minor in youth development and juvenile justice. I'm also a mom, a dog mom, a fiance. So
you the whole nine. You're the whole nine.
I'm doing it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a lot to do, but yeah, I'm just so excited to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. It's a pleasure. It's an honor for having you here as well. I know we're getting into some heavy topics today, so I think going straight into it, I think is like kind of the best way to go about it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, actually, before we even get into that a little bit, where are you from originally? Did you grow up in Jersey?
Okay, so I was born in Paterson, New Jersey. My whole family really is from Paterson. My mother moved us out of Paterson when I was pretty young, so I moved to Totowa, where I grew up. I've been in Totowa since I was 5 years old. I went to middle school in Totowa, went to PV, and then I headed off to Rutgers, Newark, where I just wrapped up. But yeah, I've been in New Jersey my whole entire life.
Word.
I love New Jersey, but I do want to move out someday.
Damn, you want to move out of Jersey?
Yeah.
Where are you thinking?
I'm thinking like South Carolina or something a little warmer, but not too hot and dry.
No, I get that.
Just a change of scenery. I mean, with my career choice, I could really go anywhere I want to go.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I want to definitely take advantage of that. But I do want to be established in my career before I make that jump.
Mm-hmm. So what made you get into criminal justice?
So the first memory that I could think about, even what is criminal justice, I was actually in my grandfather's pizzeria. Very young, probably 8, 7 years old. And the whole police force would come in for lunch. And I was just looking around. I'm like, oh, my God, these guys are so cool. And, you know, it's just like, you just think the craziest world of, when you're young, you don't really know what police officers do or what the extent of it or anything like that. So for the longest, I thought I wanted to be a police officer. But honestly, it wasn't until senior year at PV, shout out to Miss Murray at American Law. She was like, you would be an amazing lawyer. And so we did mock trial and everything like that. And I was just like dipping my toes in the water. But I just really just found a passion for law. And then as I got further into my studies, I was just like kind of debating on like, you could do so many things with a CJ degree. You could do so many things, and I just really want to focus on policy work, so changing the laws, and the best way to do that is becoming a lawyer.
So is that your end goal, to become a lawyer?
So I mean, it's funny because I have a couple end goals, but like my ultimate career goal would be a judge.
Wow.
I would love to be sitting on the bench as a judge one day. But I mean, I would love to maybe go to law school, start out as a prosecutor, and then hop onto defense or whatever. But I mean, in the end, I would love to be a judge.
Word. Actually, that's interesting. Could you explain actually some of the processes of like what's a prosecutor exactly do?
Okay, so the prosecutor represents the state or the government. So when you commit a crime, let's say you went and robbed somebody, you're not really committing a crime against, so-and-so. You're committing a crime against the state of New Jersey. So that person is responsible for pretty much helping the judge decide what you're going to be charged with and, you know, they have a lot of discretion. They can choose to maximize your charges and your sentences or minimize. They can drop, they can add. But they really are there to pretty much prosecute you or pretty much try you and cross-examine you and to pretty much prove your guilt to the state.
Word. Yeah, it's funny because I've never really gotten into too much law, and like I think policy changes is probably one of the most difficult things to get into, right? Because you're basically trying to change things that people have agreed upon that is like the law today, right?
Yeah.
So it's actually weird. I actually got I got pulled over, I think like 3 years ago, and I didn't have my registration was expired. I didn't have proof of insurance because I forgot to put it in my car. And what else? Oh, my what is the other thing? When they check your car, your inspection, my inspection sticker was
Damn.
Yeah, it was like the
Three
whole
strikes and you're out.
Yeah. And then the cop actually, like I had to go to court, and he was like, "Oh, just show the judge your insurance and everything, and it'll like all like pass." But you know what? It's crazy. I've never had like a great experience inside the courtroom because that was my second time in the courtroom. My first one was just for like a minor thing, like when I was like 17, like I got pulled over for like being on my phone, but I was using Google Maps. Whatever. I'm not trying to justify it, right?
Go.
I was fucked up. But yeah, and this prosecutor, he was cool. He was really nice about everything, but the judge was an ass, dude. And it was crazy. I'll never forget, because he wanted to maximize my like tickets for that. And at the time I was in college, I was super broke. Yeah. So I think he like wanted me to pay like an $800 fine.
Yeah.
And like
the court doesn't need it that bad.
Yeah. And I was just like, fuck. I was like, I can't pay that.
Yeah.
And like I didn't want to just be like, oh, the judge is an asshole because like, you know, he's giving me like a crazy like fine or whatever. But there ended up being like an old lady who like she was like 70. She was like she drove like handicapped and everything, and she parked I think in a school fire lane real quick to grab something because she's handicapped. And the judge made such a scene about it, dude. Like he was like I see here you've never gotten a ticket in your whole life. And she was like, no judge, I haven't. And she's like, you've never been pulled over? And it's like, no. And then he was like, wow, he's like, that's such an incredible thing. And he was being so nice to her at first, and I was like, oh shit. I was like, yeah, if anybody gets a pass today, it's this lady. You know, dude, he charged her with like $900 fucking fee, dude. It was crazy. And this judge didn't care. I don't really care. I like I think I was in Haledon. It was like the Haledon court, so I don't give a fuck about that judge. But I mean, like it sucks. Sometimes it's weird seeing how like all this stuff goes down, because sometimes you think it might be like, personally when I saw that, I was like, why are you giving that lady like who's never gotten a ticket in her life? You said it, you know, and $800. Like, is it money? Is it that? Do you ever see that stuff going on in the courtroom?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a good experience. Even if you're just bored one day, like go sit in court. It's better than watching a movie.
Are you allowed to?
Yes, the court is open to the public. That is like the foundation of the criminal justice system.
That's crazy.
But I mean, yeah. I mean, when we're talking about traffic violations and stuff like that, like the judge should really be working with the people, because you know what? You will see how those financial sanctions can literally turn into a loophole. And, you know, if she misses her first $100 payment, now that interest on that $800 payment, it goes up to, you know, $850 or $900. And people can't get out of that cycle.
Yeah, I know there's a lot, you know, I've heard a lot of that stuff within law rooms, and like people even taking out loans to pay out like tickets that they had to pay off, and they end up in that vicious cycle. Because
a lot of the times they will say, like, it depends on, you know, what code you have violated. And, you know, every case is different, but they will literally say to you, like, okay, you can't have your license. You know, you haven't paid your fines in over a year. You know, your license is gone. And then how does that person get to work, or how does that person sustain their life because of a traffic violation?
And they might even like risk it, you
know, or they might even put a warrant out for your arrest.
That's crazy.
And pull you over for something stupid, and now you're in jail.
Yeah. You know what's funny? That story that I was just telling you with the judge, I actually fought about it. Like I wanted to fight it. So they rescheduled my court date, and my friend's friend, like, you know, you always have a friend who has a friend who's a lawyer or some shit, right? Yeah. So I was asking him advice for it, because in the end of the day, I was really just there because I didn't have proof of insurance. Right. And I told him, I was like, listen, I had insurance. I just didn't have proof of it when I got pulled over. And I thought it was ridiculous. I was like, I want the minimum sentence or like the minimum fine, because like there's no reason why I should be like being charged 800 when I think the minimum fine was like, I think it was like $60 or $70. So that's a huge gap in between. Huge gap.
Yeah.
And especially like for me, like, and especially where I was like not prepared to even pay like $100. Like I could barely afford 40.
Right.
So what ended up happening, I went back and I had all my papers ready. I felt like a little lawyer or whatever. And the prosecutor was telling me, he was like, dude, if you fight this, you will lose. And then I was looking at him and I was just like, I honestly didn't know anything about law, and I was telling him, I was like, listen, and I sounded like, a dumbass, because I'm like over here, I'm just like, yeah, I have a friend of a friend, he's a lawyer. I am
prepared.
Yeah, and I was showing him all my paper, and he's like, listen, he's like, just let me talk to the judge, I'll ask him for a minimum sentence. And that day that I had to go to court, they called me up first because they had like a huge line, because there's traffic violations, right? So there's like probably like 100+ people there like waiting, right?
Yeah.
So I was actually the first one to go up, but he called my name wrong, and he was like, is Luisa here? Or he was like, where is she, right? So they just called my name wrong, and they like, said my gender wrong too. So I didn't say shit. I didn't even know they were calling me, right?
They're like, Luisa.
And I was like looking around, and I was like, and I ended up sitting there the whole time, going through everybody's. And then when they finally got to the end and finished up everybody, they're like, oh, is Luisa here? And then they're like, no, she never showed up. They're like, oh, put a warrant out for her arrest. And then I was sitting there, and then they're like, what are you here for? And I was like, my name's Luis. And then they're like, oh. And then I think the judge felt bad for the fact that I had to sit there the whole time.
Good.
And so when the prosecutor came out, like, he was like, the prosecutor's like, tell the judge what you asked me. And I was like, oh, can I have the minimum sentence or the minimum fine? And I think just because of that, I got lucky as shit. And he was like, all right, I'll give you the minimum fine. Boom. Hits the gavel, and I went away. And like, he just sent me off.
Oh my.
So I got lucky as shit. But like, if I were to, because I didn't know how that was going to go, because the prosecutor literally told me, even with all my prep work done, he was like, he's still going to fine you the maximum amount. And I was like, and I literally, like, for somebody who doesn't know anything about law or like even much about your rights, like, I know I've been studying up a little bit more like these past 2 years, especially with like, the political climate that we're in and everything going on, and being a minority, and like, what happens if I get pulled over and if I know my rights, because I've had like sketchy times before, even like with the police, like I've been pulled over before. I was in the Willowbrook Mall, and I literally just pulled out. And I got pulled over as soon as I got pulled out of my parking spot. And 2 cops came, and they were just like mad aggressive, like shining lights into my cars and shit. And I was like, "What'd I do?" And then they're like, "You have your taillight is out." And I was like, you were gonna say and like my taillight was out, so I was like, I was like, shit, you know what I mean? I was like, all right. And then luckily, I mean, like in Jersey, we have the PBA cards. That's like a whole other like discussion to see like if they're like. Because they're kind of fucked up. Because if you don't have one, you know what I mean?
Oh, come on. It's like a get out of jail card.
Yeah, it is a get out of jail.
Sometimes. I mean, I have never used them. My fiance has. I've been with him. He's gone out of a couple tickets because he has that gold card. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yo, you are so lucky, because if you did not have that gold card, you would have been paying a $180 ticket.
Yeah, and some people get out of real serious shit, too,
and then,
with that.
Yeah, and then sometimes I've seen it actually go the opposite way, where the officer's like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, I've heard stories like that, too.
I don't care. Go call him. Go cry about it. So it could go either way, but I mean, it's just a privilege, that is a privilege.
It's weird. Definitely. It's weird. What do you, because even like in that situation where like both officers were being like, I felt aggressive, because this other guy came into the other side of my car, and he's like, open your windows. And I was like, damn, dude. I was like, no problem here. And then I took out like I had not the gold card, but I just had like one of the ones that I guess they hand out to friends or shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a weird thing that I have going on there. I took it out. His demeanor completely changed. Because I think my friend or the cop who gave it to me, he was just like, oh, just always make sure like when you hand your license, you slide that under the license, right?
Yes.
And so when I gave him my license and stuff, he was like, he looked at it and he was like, damn. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, who do you know?
Yeah,
and
who's so-and-so?
I'm always just like, yo, my uncle's a cop. Like, yeah, he's in Patterson. There's so many cops in Patterson, so I'm just like, you can't like fucking pick out of all of them. Yeah. So it's like, it's crazy. Yeah. So I don't know. Would you ever change that like? Because I think we're the only state in the country that actually has like basically these get out of free jail cards.
Honestly, I don't know. Like, I don't know if other states have them. But I mean, I just think that everybody should be treated by the law the same way. And if I have a little shiny gold card, that doesn't mean that you should just let me off the hook because I know somebody. I mean, it's just a privilege. So, yeah, I don't think there should just be handed out privileges to anyone just because you're related to someone who's a cop. Who cares?
Yeah, it's a touchy subject, too, because when you actually talk to, like, people who are cops and people who have family of cops, you know what I mean? Like, they don't give a shit because they're the ones, like, you know, getting the most benefit out of it.
And that's the thing, too, though. Like, I do see the sacrifice on their end. Like, if my fiance was a police officer, like, there is a sacrifice that I also put in for that, too. So I understand it both ways. But I just don't know. I just don't think it's necessary, to be honest with you. Like, we could do without it.
Yeah, because to be honest, the only time I've ever used it was like
when you're getting pulled over.
Yeah, that one situation. So like, why are you getting pulled over?
So don't get pulled. Like, you know what I mean? Just
no, yeah, for sure.
If you follow the law, you won't have to worry about a gold card. But you know, it happens. Like your taillight was out. You didn't freaking mean to have a taillight out. You know what I mean? Life happens. But I think everybody should be treated with grace and not just like instant hostility. Because it from the you know, you like have to. It's funny because when I talk about this, I kind of think about my child. Like when she's flipping out and she's going crazy, like you have to match her vibe. You have to match her tone. And if you're at a 10, she's going to be at a 20. And you just got to, you know, try to like de-escalate and bring it as calm as you can. Calm. Because just naturally and organically, hopefully the situation will diffuse.
Yeah. You know what? Let's hop into that a little bit because I think it was your thesis paper you sent me, right? That was like that the bigger one about like child abuse, domestic violence, and everything like that. Talk to me, if you don't mind. Talk to me a little bit about like your journey and especially like what you wrote in the beginning of the paper of like how you started off in your childhood and how that all kind of like transpired.
Yeah. So before we get started, I just want to define domestic violence for anyone who doesn't know the proper definition. So domestic or family violence can be usefully described for this paper as a pattern through a combination of physical, emotional, sexual, or financial abuse, enforced social isolation, and intimidation. And I have a statistic here that says 1 in 15 children are exposed to DV each year, and 90% of these children are key eyewitnesses to this violence. So I took a youth violence course. So I had to do a thesis paper on youth violence. So I chose domestic violence and childhood development. To really get started, I guess I will tell a little bit of my story with domestic violence.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I might key in like a little bit with just questions in between. Okay, so just go ahead and I'll.
So I mean, for the most part, I've had a lovely childhood. I've had a beautiful, loving family. I was raised by a single mom, who I love you so much, Tammy. Shout out to you.
Shout out to her, yo. Single moms.
Single moms rule the world.
Shit, bro.
But yeah, so my mother was in an abusive relationship from when I was about 5 or 6 years old to about 13. And the abuse that I endured and I witnessed was severe and chronic, and it was really an everyday thing for about 5-6 years of my life. And now with my degree in youth development, I've kind of realized why it was so impactful that I experienced it in those ages. It's because, you know, when you're from 5 to 6 to 13, your brain, your hormones, your body, everything is a roller coaster of change. So it really impacted me immensely. And I mean, it still impacts me till this day. I always say, like, I've seen stuff worse than Lifetime movies. And I could give you, you know, examples if you want.
Whatever you're always open to like talk about, because like I
Well,
said,
I think it's important because it shows a visual of what kids go through.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't want to be super graphic about it. Trigger warning. But, you know, I will tell the story that I put in my paper. And honestly, it's probably the most psychologically traumatic night I have ever been through. It was just a normal day. I was about 7 years old. My mother, her boyfriend, and his daughter and I went to Chuck E. Cheese right on Route 23, and everything was fine. Had a good time, whatever. And as we came out, it was a little later at night. It was snowing, and so everything was fine. We got in the car. We're going home. And my mom and him started fighting about God knows what. I don't know. I was really young. I don't remember. But he basically pulled over to the side of Route 23. And, sorry. He basically stopped the car. I remember him, like, unbuckling my mom's seatbelt. He's like, get the F out. Like, leave, get out the car. And my first reaction, I'm like 5 years old. I'm like trying to undo my seatbelt. I'm like, I'm going where my mom's going. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Like, fine. I'm going on the side of the highway with my mom. I don't care. And so he kind of like, you know, was pushing her really hard. She was slamming against the door. And I guess he kind of pushed her and opened the door at the same time. So she fell out the car. And then he sees me trying to like get the hell out of the car, and he's like holding my seatbelt thing like over the seat. And in that split second, I was just like, holy shit. Like, I may never see my mom again.
Of course, I mean, that's what you're thinking as a kid, yeah.
You don't know. And like, before that day, he said to me, like, you know, I will kill you. I will kill your mom. You know, no one will ever find you. And it's like, when you're that young, you believe that. You 100% believe, like, this grown-ass man is going to do whatever the hell he wants with me or, you know, my mom, and no one's going to stop him. So it was really crazy. Eventually, I don't remember, I think I was scratching him or hitting him or something, and I kind of convinced him to get my mom back in the car. And I don't know how I did that, but she got back in the car and, you know, we went home, and the next day is something else. I mean, there's been endless nights where my mom would be like, it would be like 3 a.m., 4 a.m. My mom's like, wake up, we gotta go. And I'm like, what happened? Like, literally, like out of my sleep, like still asleep. And I remember just walking the streets of Totowa at like 3 a.m. with my mom, because it was just like safer to be out on the streets literally than to be in my house. And then I would wake up the next day and go to Washington Park School, and like no one knew anything. I don't think anybody that I grew up with or anybody that I really knew, I only told like one or two people. Like, that was like my deepest, darkest secret. And I never told really anybody, but like, that's why one of my biggest things is like, be kind to everyone, because you seriously don't know what is going on at home. Like, you really don't. And the smallest thing can make like the biggest difference for a kid.
All right. Damn. That's a lot to unpack there. So
yeah,
let's start unpacking it a little bit. How did this progression go? Because I imagine that when has your mom ever talked to you about her relationship with him, or has it not been like a topic you guys talk about?
I mean, it's kind of taboo. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. I feel like when I do talk about it, I don't want to upset her. I don't want to like reopen those wounds and get down into it. But, like, as for me and my mom, I think we have a lot of trauma that we need to unpack individually. And
like,
then,
still to like today.
Yeah, I think, I mean, one of my goals for this year was to start therapy. So I definitely want to get moving on that goal. I definitely need to go to therapy.
Therapy is always a beautiful thing. I'm actually going to be having my therapist on this podcast.
Lit.
Yeah, so like therapy could be one of the most beautiful things, but as long as both parties or anybody who's involved really commits to it,
Right.
you know, and you'll never know sometimes, and I'm just saying this now, like, your first therapist might not be the right one for you.
Right.
You know, you got to kind of search through and kind of like, you know, feel them out. But you got to give them at least like 3 months of your time and like really just kind of go through it. But yeah, as you were saying, not wanting to reopen like wounds
It's hard.
and stuff. Yeah.
It's hard, yeah. And I think it's probably harder for my mom because she like really dealt with the abuse, like physically, in every way. I've seen my mom open the door and boom, get Superman punch in the face. Sorry. So like that's really her battle to really digest and really get her mental health right with that. For me, my main priority is just to make sure I never make the same mistakes of either abusing or, not maybe abusing in my sense, but I do have anger issues sometimes. And over the years, I've definitely learned to control myself, but that doesn't come overnight. And I feel like because I've had a childhood where, violence was always the answer, my brain is just wired to just go from, 0 to 1,000 so quickly. So, for the last couple of years, I've really just been trying to make sure I dump all those, old toxic behaviors out the window because I'm raising, the next generation, and I need her to know that, one, abuse is never okay. You have to respect yourself. You are worthy, and you are more deserving than love and respect as a human being. And two, that she needs to stay away from, boys and men or, women, whoever, it may be, to never accept abuse. And so I think really educating kids pretty early on just what is acceptable and what is not is so important.
So you could either share like either your mom's personal experience or in general, but I'm kind of interested because I feel like whenever an outsider is looking on in these situations, you always wonder, you're like, how do you keep getting into this cycle? Because for me,
why doesn't she leave?
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you just leave?
Yeah, so like, how do you feel like either your mom or people in general?
No, I mean, I will
cycle?
speak for our personal situation because honestly, every situation is so different. But like for us, it's not. There's a couple problems with this. One is the way the law handles domestic violence, which there has to be a complete reboot or complete system change in how we process and prosecute domestic violence.
How's like the system? How does it work now?
I'm talking about with like, temporary restraining orders. And, I have gone with my friends and I've gone with other people to go get those restraining orders. And you have to sit in front of a judge and beg on your hands and knees. You know what I mean? You have to prove it. And it's like, why do I have to, spill my whole life story out to someone for them to believe I am being hurt and I am being abused and I am not safe from this person? Like, believe survivors.
What kind of proof do they need for you to actually end up getting something like that?
I mean, the best proof to have any crime on, to be prepared for is to have video or audio. A lot of these domestic violence situations are not, one-time fights. It's very, very rarely that a man will put their hands on you once and never do it again. So, if you feel a fight coming on or you feel the energy is off or whatever it is, have your phone out, have it hiding somewhere, get that audio recording, and, gather your evidence. Text messages, voicemails. I mean, there's now everything, all the evidence we need is in our hands, on our phones, So don't underestimate the power of a cell phone to really help you out of those situations because you can't deny. Listen, you commit a crime on video. How are you going to deny that?
No, it's point blank. Point blank.
So you know what I mean? That's why I always tell people, like, if you're not ready right now, just start gathering your shit. You know, like you have to start protecting yourself. And so, there's many other ways to do that. I mean, I always recommend getting a restraining order. If you can get one, that's also like a privileged thing. And, they don't just hand out restraining orders like they hand out PBA cards.
Mm-hmm. That's actually
so you know what I mean?
It's weird because the thing about it, it's like if you need to gather your evidence, it's almost like you have
the burden of proof.
Yeah, like you need to suffer a little bit through that to kind of gather up your shit.
Yeah,
but even like playing devil's advocate, why are they hesitant towards giving restraining orders like that? Because like let's say for an example, like again, getting into touchy subjects here, some people might be overreacting, you know what I mean? Not saying overreacting. If you're getting abused, you're getting abused, you know what I mean? But there are there
are always people that are gonna falsify shit, and it doesn't matter if it's DV or not. So yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
So what's the other side look like then? To the point, like why? Because I would imagine like it seems to me so simple, you know what I mean? Like someone's getting abused, give the restraining order.
I know.
But why do they hold back?
So the main reason is judicial discretion, and that just means a judge's willingness to give it out or not. And that is the loophole that I'm trying to fix, is that you shouldn't need someone to grant you that. To me, that's like a human right. If someone is making my life unsafe, I should have a legal way to keep and protect me and my kids.
How much evidence do you typically need, or is it just based on what the judge feels like?
Yeah, it's so discretionary, and that's the loophole. It's like even a huge foundational problem that we have in this country is that we don't have like universal definitions of things. So, we need more like universal definitions of domestic violence. And we can even break it down to sexual violence and psychological violence versus this and that. But, it's just...
So let's kind of walk around back to why these kind of cycles, they become a cycle. You know what I mean? Because again...
Oh, and why women don't just leave.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So... in many cases, like me and my mom, we would actually move. So our strategy was kind of just like house hopping around Totowa. So I remember in my childhood, I probably lived in probably 10 or 12 houses in Totowa. And, my mom tried the whole restraining order thing. She got a temporary restraining order once, I remember, or now in hindsight, now I know. And he would just violate it. Like he didn't care what that piece of paper said. He was always in violation of a restraining order. And I remember he was actually arrested once for violating the restraining order, and he was out like on bail like the next day, still terrorizing us. So the one thing is that they still come around. They will still be following you. They will still be threatening you. They will still, my mom's abuser would say, I'm going to kill you. I will kill your family. I will kill your friends. It's just threats. And these, the victims are pretty much programmed to believe these threats. And a lot of the abusers break them down so bad mentally that, one, they're very dependent on the abuser. So with finances, 90% of abusers are men, and men are usually the breadwinners of the household. So it's usually you're being abused in their house. They're paying the bills. You know what I mean? So when, where are you going to go? If you have kids, you're going to go live out in the streets, in a shelter, and this and that. And, in hindsight, the answer is yes. Get out, go live in that shelter, do it.
That's your advice?
100%, because I'm telling you right now, it doesn't get better. It does not get better. There's only a couple ways that relationship will end. It's one, you walk out resilient, okay? You are a survivor, and you're going to walk free and proud and strong the rest of your life. Two, he's going to kill you. He's going to kill your family. He's going to hurt everybody that you love. He'll do it, because if he's that or I don't want to say he, right? I don't want to be gender specific, but I'm talking about the abuser here. If they really want to do something, they'll do it. So, and 3, you're going to live a miserable life. You're going to be treated not as a human being. And I don't, I know it's so much harder than said, right? Yeah. But to leave is the most dangerous time, but also it's your life turning point decision. You're depending on where your life is going to go. Are you going to continue to live in a life of fear, in trauma, in abuse, and, being isolated from your friends and from your family? You're going to live like a prisoner. And I don't, I really don't say that lightly. Like, you live like a prisoner.
So what's the turnaround rate for something like this? So, like, let's say, for example, a mom, just in this case, gets away from her abuser, decides to live in a shelter. She has no, like she doesn't have financial support that you need. I mean, you still have to get a lawyer, right? You still have to take it to court. And then, like, the whole court process is a whole process.
It's a financial burden itself.
Right. So, right. Like, what does that process look like? What type of money would they need for that process? Like, kind of, like, walk me through that.
To be honest, I'm not 100% sure because each case is so different. And even where you are can, like, you know what I mean, can it can decide so much. Like, if you live in an area, if you live in, I don't know, Ohio, and there's 3 domestic violence shelters in Ohio, you know what I mean? Compared to if you're in Paterson, New Jersey, and there's 12 in Paterson, or you know what I mean? It's just, there's so many factors to take in. But also, you can also look into things like organizations that do pro bono work and try to start there, or call the courthouse. The number one thing you have to do is not be afraid to ask questions. Ask for help. Even if you ask somebody at the shelter, or call a shelter and say, hey, I'm in this position and I don't know what to do. See what they can offer you. Also, I wanted to, and if we can pin it, the domestic violence hotline number. I had it on my phone, but I just want to plug it in here. So the National Domestic Violence Hotline number is 800-799-7233. So call them. Call them. The best thing that they can do is give you advice and help you make one move in the right direction. And then if not, then you at least got a little off your chest and you know that you have a resource to use if you're ready to do so.
What's the differences in difficulty to when you're suffering through domestic abuse with children than without? Yeah.
That one made me emotional. I think that trauma is not just yours, it's another person's. And so, me, I wasn't physically abused by my mom's abuser, but mentally it's just as bad, or I would say maybe even worse for victims to suffer so psychologically. It's hard, but then also you have somebody, a little one, depending on you for food and shelter and water and school and everything. So it's just more responsibility. If you're leaving by yourself, you just got to worry about me, myself, and I. But if you have a little one, a baby, a teenager, whoever it is, you have a child, when you leave, you're still responsible for, making you and your child survive through that. You still have to do everything that you have to do as a mother, but in that situation. So I dealing with domestic violence with kids is just, beyond life-changing for the mother, but also the kids.
Actually, I have a lot of things on my mind.
Go ahead.
I think it's not that it's any easier, right? but there's kind of pros and cons to, I think, every different domestic like abuse situation. And like, for example, I feel like if you were a single mom and you had a boyfriend, it might be easier to detach from the boyfriend since he doesn't have like let's say a legitimate reason to be in the kid's life, right? Because he's not necessarily a parent, or if they, especially if single mom didn't marry the boyfriend, you know what I mean? It's not like they're co-parenting. But what about a husband and a wife who had a kid together, and now the husband is starting to become abusive and abusing the wife and also fighting for custody? Like, how, what does a situation like that like look like and entail? Because, you know, I feel like there's a lot of people I know who have family members who go through these situations, and you know, you always want to do so much for your family, but like you feel so helpless because I feel like, you know, they're like, oh, we're going through the lawyers, we're going through this, but they still have to live together,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So it's in that situation, you know, it's kind of like, do you stay living together and go through it, and it's better to just do that than to kind of just fully separate? Because like I said, it's really about just letting the court papers, like, you know, take their time and do stuff. And I know
Court takes a while.
Yeah.
Custody cases in itself could take a year plus. So I mean, everybody has to do what decision is best for them, and safety for them and safety for their child. For me, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if there's a huge difference of going through domestic violence married to someone or not. I think when you are just feeling that low as a person, it doesn't matter who you're with. And this is a good point to bring up, that I always say, like, domestic violence is one crime that literally does not discriminate. It happens to poor. It happens to rich. You guys would be surprised how the spectrum of people, of victims of domestic violence, from different, you know, socioeconomic backgrounds, race, everything, occupation, everything, mothers, not mothers, married, not married, you know, DV does not discriminate. So, I mean, but it, obviously, if you have, you know, a custody case and a domestic violence case, it's more money in lawyers, it's more time going to the courthouse, more, you know, just more preparation for cases. Yeah, that must be also stressful. But, like, I don't know, because, you know, personally, thank God, I've never been in that situation in my relationship. So I don't know if that would make a difference, to be honest with you.
what could you do as an outsider
This is a great question.
into a situation to like either help or mend, or even people who are going through it and they're going through the process?
So I have to say, I'm still trying to figure the perfect way out myself, personally, trying to aid people in my life. The number one thing, though, I think you can do is to listen to whoever is going through it. And sometimes just when you just listen, don't say anything, please, because what's going to happen is you're going to make them upset. And what you don't want to do is push them away and then poof, they're gone. So you have to listen. You have to be completely understanding, and you have to understand that it's at their pace. Like, legally, in no way can you or I or anybody make somebody leave a abusive relationship. And also, you know, offer support, offer, you know, hey, so-and-so, I will go to the courthouse with you and I will hold your hand and fill out every paperwork. I will, you know, I'll help you move your stuff out of the apartment. I will help you do every single thing. Anything that you need, I will do. Just be unconditionally supportive to that person, but also, you know, provide them with real resources too, like hotline numbers. And if they need a lawyer, help them find a lawyer. If they need, you know, whatever it is. But also the financial aspect of leaving an abusive relationship can be huge. And sometimes that means someone's losing their house. Someone's losing, you know, the way they eat and the way they clothe themselves. And they're losing pretty much how they survive. So you have to you have to help them get back up on their feet as well in those aspects. If that's, giving them ShopRite gift cards so they can eat or something like that. You got to think out of the box. But just be supportive. Always listen. Just know that it's at their pace. You can't do anything. And that's another loophole it's just painful to go through as an outsider. Mm-hmm. It's like you're living in a car wreck but in slow motion.
What can someone expect the hotline to help them with?
You know what? I don't really know. But I'm sure they will provide resources in the nearest shelters, or do you need medical attention? Do you need police? Do you need, I'm not sure because to be honest with you, I've never called it personally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I always think like that could be like, maybe that could be an interesting thing to like, look into as well, because I feel like sometimes people feel like everybody's against them. And then I know so many people, including myself, it's hard to even ask for help, when you need it.
And then when you do ask for help, you feel like, okay, that wasn't really help.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I tried to do the right thing, but now I'm just screwed.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I understand that too, yeah.
Let's get into the effects that domestic abuse could have on kids.
Yeah.
And this, for me, it's like, it's super insane because I think, it's one thing to remember what you went through as a kid and look back at it, but I'll be completely honest, and I've said this on so many podcasts before too. My niece was recently born last September, right?
Yeah.
And thank you so much. And she's completely like changed my life in the way I view stuff, and I'm like so much more sensitive towards kids. Like even if I hear on the news like something happening to a kid, I'll cry. If I'm watching a YouTube video, like, or even a movie, and a kid dies in a movie or something, I will bawl out because like it's just like immediately it becomes personal. And I always remember my mom telling me, she's like, you'll never understand until you have kids. And I just have my niece, and I could almost feel it through her, and I can't even imagine the feeling I'll get when I have my own personal kids. And like I don't even like, I'm almost terrified at that.
No, I mean, when you become a parent, and I know from experience, your whole perspective on life changes. Everything shifts, and what was important then isn't important now. And you will die for your baby. You will do anything you have to protect, to love, support, guide, anything my child needs, I'll do. I don't care what I have to do.
So when do you think at the ages when kids, I feel like this could go in so many ways, but like, what age do you think like kids could start actually recognizing that what like domestic abuse is?
Oh, like what age they can see abuse and know like that is abuse? Mm-hmm. Oh, very early. Like I'm not going to get too scientific, but Piaget's stages of operations pretty much point out that around like toddler age, 3 to 5 is when they become aware of others' actions, and they kind of develop their moral compass. So they will know if things are right or wrong. And, they don't have the greatest communication skills. They're very young, but they can absolutely tell and sense in the room that something is off at as young as 3. So I would say any age after toddlerhood, you're recognizing that. As for what age should we be actually having an intervention for kids that have went through this, research says adolescence. There's a couple of reasons for that. Adolescence, just the time and stage that their brains are at, their hormones are at, everything biologically is going on, but also that's the time that they're starting to have their own intimate relations. And not only just sex, but they're branching out. They're starting to have girlfriends and boyfriends and even friendships. And during that time, you will see in a child who has experienced domestic violence, you will see those very, toxic behaviors seep through in those relationships at those ages. And so, for example, if you have, your first boyfriend, right? And, he's very jealous and he doesn't allow you to wear this and this. And it's like those little signs. That girl is going to carry that into her next relationship and think that that's acceptable behavior. And so when you experience abuse at home, you're 10 times more accepting of maybe not just abusive, but disrespectful or intrusive behavior because you're used to seeing so much worse.
That's crazy. So do you think that the domestic abuse cycle lives on through lifetimes based on kids who end up seeing their parents getting domestically abused?
Yeah. So let's start. So right now so for my research paper, my thesis paper about domestic violence and childhood development, I kind of go into the short-term effects of DV, and then I break it into long-term effects, and then there's intergenerational effects, and that's what you would be talking about. So just for short-term effects, in my paper, I argue that there are no short-term effects because all these short-term feelings or short-term anxiety can literally fester into a person's entire life and grow into other debilitating, mental illnesses that they may have. So in my paper, I cited a research study by Olivia Paul, and basically it was conducted in France. It was through 46 children who have been exposed to DV severely and chronically. And basically she found that 28% had anxiety, 17% had PTSD, 17% had dissociation, and basically she found that the longer the abuse occurred, the more anxiety somebody will have. And she also stated that children exposed to domestic violence are twice as likely to have PTSD. And even though mental illnesses are listed as short-term effects, I believe the illnesses will linger and rewire someone's brain.
And that's kind of what you wrote too, based on like your personal experience as well, and what you're living through today.
Yeah.
Is there anything that a kid can do to help their parent or parents that go through this? Because it's funny. I've never really gone through any type of I didn't really see too much domestic abuse when I was little. I definitely seen I've been at friend's house, and I've seen their parents get into a really bad verbal argument, but I've never seen anything physical. And even it's funny, my parents, they would argue a lot, never got physical. But I remember telling them, even at young, I was like, yo, y'all fighting fucks me up. Like, if y'all are gonna argue, just don't do it in front of me.
Right.
And it's crazy because even now, I can't imagine me being a parent in the future and fighting in front of my kid.
Or that's my biggest, and that's why I'm so blessed because I have a partner that knows how important this is to me, and that he knows that is one rule in our house. I don't care if I'm fighting on the phone. I don't care, if it's fighting with my friends, whatever. There's no fighting in front of my child, period. No way in hell. Not in my house.
So do you think are there any resources? Is there anything that a kid could do to help their parent?
If you're a kid in this situation, you need to I would speak to your parent to let them know how you're feeling. But if you don't feel comfortable speaking to your parent, you need to speak to an adult. You need to speak to a teacher. You need to speak to someone that is an adult that can help you in any way. Maybe that's an aunt, an uncle, whoever it may be, a family member. You need to be truthful to someone because they need to be able to have your back if you need that. But on the flip side, and this is actually something that I struggle with very much so, it's called parentification. And so that is when a child has to take care of a parent and siblings, and severe domestic violence is associated with strong parentification of a child and is closely linked to feelings of blame and fear of abandonment. And so that's like basically when you worry about your parents so much that consumes you. And like I've struggled with this my whole life. Like I've always just been so worried about my mom, and every single day, like it doesn't stop. But I mean, it's just like so deeply rooted in me because I feel like I have to protect her. I have to, you know.
And it's stemming from like what you've been through like as a kid and everything.
100%.
And how do you feel like, do you think, like you say you still struggle through it, has it gotten better throughout the years, or you feel like it's like the same way this has always been?
I think the stress of parentification is the same, but I think I've just gotten better at managing it. And right now I'm just so busy in my own life with like being a mom, studying for the LSATs, applying to law school. Like I really tried to, in the last couple months, redirect my focus and my energy into like self-growth. And like doing that, it's helped me a lot because I'm like, I need to take care of myself. Yeah. Because if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of anybody.
No, yeah, that is 100%. That is 100%. Yeah. I actually, for example, I'll tell you the story. I was working at a restaurant, and I had this weird couple come in, and it's funny because this happened. I think you hit me up for the podcast, and this had happened like maybe like 3 days after.
Stop.
Right? It's crazy.
Oh my God.
It's crazy how this shit happens. And I wanted to bring it up specifically today because I didn't know what to do in this situation because this couple came in and they already seemed like they were kind of like agitated or whatever, brought out their food, they're eating and whatever. And then my coworker comes up to me, and they were like the only ones in the restaurant basically, and they were like in this little corner and stuff, and like, you know, you had to cut the corner to look at them or whatever. And my coworker comes up to me and he's like, "Hey dude," he's like, "keep an eye on that guy." And I was like, "Why?" He's like, "I think he just smacked the shit out of the girl." And I was like, and you see this girl and she's just in her hands, just like kind of crying to herself, distraught, but being very quiet, you know what I mean? Which I feel like in this situation's like, you know, she didn't want to make a scene. She feels very shameful. Yeah. And like for me, like I very grew up a little bit like old school Latino, like with some old school Latino like things, and some of them are I don't follow all of it, but one thing that I always grew up with was just like, you never hit women, you know what I mean? Especially if you're a man, you never put your hands on a woman ever. And for me, like, I just felt like rage in that moment if that was true, you know what I mean? And I was just like, shit, like I would want to do something, but even in that sense, I'm just like, what do I do? You know what I mean? What can I do to help this girl? And like, you know, before I know it, like they're up and they're out. And like, you know, I look back at that now and I'm just like, shit, like I feel like the least I could have done was find the hotline number, maybe slip it in a receipt or something, you know. But I mean,
that's a great idea. Like if you have a pen and paper handy real quick. It's okay, it's very hard. And plus you never want to put yourself at risk. Like if the guy was like 10 times your size and could beat you up easily, like if he got that mad, you have to know that. Yeah. That's a possibility. He's going to whoop your ass. Like, you know what I mean? People get very defensive about these things and understandably so. For me personally, I would have ran up to her. I would have, you know, if I saw her go to the bathroom, I would have went to the bathroom. I would have tried to get the victim alone. Because regardless if the abuser is in their vicinity, they're not going to tell you the truth. They're going to be too afraid to, or they're going to, you know, they're going to be so scared they're not going to know what to do. So that's one thing. Try to get them alone. Ask them if they're okay. If, you know, they need anything. Do you need me to call the police? Do you need me to walk you to your car? Do you need me to Uber you somewhere? You know. Just try to be helpful in any way that you can. I always, personally, myself, like, I don't care. Like, if you're a man and you're 6'5", 300 pounds, like, I still will say something to you. That's just, you know, that's just, like, one of my strengths and one of my weaknesses at the same time. Like, you know, it depends on what risk you're willing to take, but don't put yourself in a very bad situation. If anything, I would have like maybe followed them out to see what car, get his license plate, maybe call the police. You know, it's hard. Every situation is different. Every situation is different. Like, I've been in a situation where this was when I was like a junior in high school. Some kid took me on a date to Radio City, and we were walking out in Times Square, and I saw like this big British man like yelling at his wife, and she was just a wreck. And I just ran up to her. Like, I don't know, it was just my instincts. And I ran up to her. I'm like, what's wrong? Are you okay? Blah, blah, blah. And basically, they were visiting. They were from, like, London or something. And he, like, took all her money, took all her bank cards, everything, and stranded her in New York City. And so all I did in that situation was I gave her whatever was in my wallet. I think I had my last $80. I gave her my $80. And I waited until the police came, and I just kind of just explained the situation to give a little more clarity. And then they took her to a hotel, and I don't know what happened. But, I mean, it depends on who you are. It depends on what risks you're willing to take. But there's always ways to help discreetly. And if you have to call the police, call the police. That's what they're for, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And if they pull over and they see a mark on her or something, there has to be an arrest. If the police are called in New Jersey to a domestic violence call and they see bruises on someone has to get arrested.
Wow, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and that's not how it's always been. So that's a step in the right direction.
So what does that process like look like? Like, they get arrested and then they go to jail that night. Do they get out on bail like the next morning, or?
Well, now with bail reform, it's different. But you know, they could be out within the week. You know what I mean? It depends.
And if they get arrested, that doesn't necessarily mean like they got to go to court or anything, does it?
I mean, yeah, you will file suit, or they will file complaint against so and so, and the state of New Jersey would charge them with domestic violence, and they would have a case. And then,
but that wouldn't necessarily mean too that they would get a restraining order at the same time, would it?
No.
That's crazy.
I mean, it could be done in conjunction if it's done smartly, just not to waste anybody's time. Yeah, but that's not how it always is.
Yeah, and
you would think it would be so easy. Like,
yeah, because who automatically thinks of that stuff? Because I mean, like, I imagine going through all this stuff and going through paperwork and the legalities and things, like it's difficult, and especially going through the legalities of shit. It's like, you know, you don't know about these things regularly, and I feel like especially people who are going through it, I mean, if they were doing research, they probably would be out of the situation better in a short amount of time. You know, they would have reached out to resources. And I feel like, unfortunately, the people who suffer the most from this are the people who aren't educated in this topic or never think it'll happen to them. And I think it's important even for everybody to be educated on it, because if you see it happening to someone, at least you could be like a resource. Say something, you know.
Say something, or call the cops, or just try to help out in any way. You don't have to get so confrontational. You don't have to be in each other's face and blah, blah, blah. But you need to let that victim know that I see you, I hear you, I believe you, and, you know, I want to help you. Even if it's just calling the cops, let them take care of it. Or even handing someone the hotline's number. You don't know where their phone call is going to lead to. Mm-hmm. You just gave them the key to open the door to see what's going to happen in their life, you know? But it could be a phone number that could change someone's life.
Word. You know what? I think it would be a shame if I didn't at least try to bring up this topic. Have you been following the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case at all?
I thought you were going to say... something else.
No, you're Gucci, bro. I was
gonna... okay. So I have seen snippets of it. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie, I haven't been following the trial religiously, like some of the other trials that happened in the last 2 years that I really followed. From what I could tell, oh my God, it's so much.
I think it's weird in this case because it's like the woman is being the abuser.
Well, yeah, it's like toxic femininity. I don't know if I said that right, but I mean, listen, like, I also want to say this too. Like, women can be abusers too. Like, that happens chronically and severely and frequently. Like, that is 100% a thing. So we need to put that out there as well.
Do you have like examples of what that looks like?
What do you mean?
Like, I mean, like, would it be like the same thing? Because it's weird. Because like,
women hit.
Yeah.
Women will stab you.
Mm-hmm.
Women will, listen, I'm telling you right now, as a CJ major, you think that the men are bad at committing crimes? Women are violent. They, not all, I'm not going to say all, but, we all have the capability of being violent and abusive. Just because she's, 5'7", 140 pounds, maybe it might not hurt you as much, but she's still going to that level, so she's, everybody is capable of it.
Yeah, because I think what was most interesting, well, one of the big highlights of the case that came out so far, and which I feel like plays into the stigma of like men can't also be abused, was that there was a clip of her saying she's like see what they say,
tell
Johnny.
The world, Johnny.
Yeah, tell the world that
disgusting.
A man is like getting abused. Hey, it's wild.
That's
wild.
Disgusting. No, I mean, she was playing on masculinity and she wanted to make him feel like he's a bitch if he were to go through with it. And she is the reason why, women like her, or not, when people like her are the reason why there is a backtrack in domestic violence progress. You know what I'm trying to say? When people try to undermine the system, when they lie, when they put people down, when they, she's a manipulator. You could see it. You could easily see it.
Do you?
And her attorneys, I don't know where she found those attorneys.
No, those attorneys
where she found her attorneys.
Crazy.
I don't know where.
Crazy. Because they were just
Craigslist? I don't know.
Yeah, might as well be. No,
I
literally,
don't know.
might as well be.
I don't know.
Because, I think she changed them halfway through now, or, she changed something. I think she changed, her social team, or I don't even know what the fuck, but I know she changed something. But, yeah, no, it's really downhill for her now. Especially, I think they just did the cross witness.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see something.
What I have to say, though, is Camila Vasquez, Johnny's attorney, is excellent. And what stands out to me about her, she knows the rules. And for me, that's what makes a great lawyer. She knows. You saw that clip of her calling out objection every 10 seconds?
Yeah, I literally was watching that just this morning.
Leading, objection, leading. Like, that's what a good lawyer does, She knows the freaking rules. She's not going to let shit go over her head.
Yeah.
And that's what they were hoping for. No. But I would be shocked if the jury doesn't rule in Johnny Depp's favor.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. And it's weird too, because in any situation, even when it seems so obvious,
you don't know.
That's why I always play devil's advocate.
It only takes one.
Yeah, because it only takes a video of Johnny Depp actually doing some fucked up shit.
Or it takes one juror to say something to cause doubt. It's intense. I know.
I'm really thinking about what life looks after for a person who gets abused and has their family after, because I can't imagine you would want to stay in the same area or even around that other person, because sometimes I feel like in my opinion, I feel like best case scenario, the abuser gets caught, restraining order, and honestly in my head I'm like, he should probably go to jail for a couple of years.
Yeah.
But what happens if that guy gets out again
and he
starts
does it to
harassing
another woman,
or even harassing you?
It's a cycle.
Would you suggest somebody who goes through those situations to leave the town that they're living in and just get away? And what happens if a person doesn't want to?
Well, I totally understand why they wouldn't want to, especially if you have family and friends and your kids are in schools and you're tied to the community. Don't leave that. I think because really what the most important thing to do in that situation is to maintain those strong bonds that you have with people, to maintain, your relationship with your family and your friends and the community and school, after school programs. And if your kids have friends, they need that normalcy. They need that in their life. It could be very traumatic for them to go start another school and stuff like that. But what I do have to say is there is a level of abuse that you can be running from, right? And if it's definitely fatal, and if it's definitely, bodily harm, seriously, you are going to really get hurt by this abuser. I don't see the risk in leaving. You have to weigh out your options. If you don't have a great support system, you know what I mean? If you don't have friends and family and people to help you and you're by yourself, I would recommend leaving, because you yourself need a fresh reset. You need a fresh slate. You need to feel safe. And I mean, it's hard. It's hard to leave everything you've ever known. But I think that's one of the beautiful things about change, is that it's so scary, but on the other side, it's like a world that you would never imagine if you didn't take that step.
What are the most common things that a person who finally gets out of that situation, they're a successful survivor, let's say, right? What are the most common long-term effects that they end up going throughout their life that they might need to like seek therapy for, or you know, in general?
Okay, so now I'm going to move into long-term effects. And then we'll talk about intergenerational, and that's really, really heavy stuff. So for long-term effects, and I'm talking about child right now, but it definitely applies to adults as well. Sorry, one sec. Okay, so long-term effects can be conduct disorders, behavioral problems. So that could be aggression, that could be like antisocial disorder, and that just means that a child is having a very hard time relating to peers around them, be very to themselves, very quiet. And one of the biggest indicator of if someone is going to commit a crime is if they have antisocial disorder. So that stuff can stem from childhood, from being antisocial, and it can grow into an antisocial disorder, and that can grow into criminal activity as well. Also, we have social functioning, moral development, separation anxiety, ability to negotiate intimate relationships later in life. They have severe problems in their own relationships. They don't know how to be a loving and communicative partner. They have to learn how to love correctly. And that's completely a journey within itself. They can't sleep. They have temper tantrums, aggression, and one of the biggest effects of domestic violence, surprisingly, is homelessness.
How so?
So, like I said before, most of the time, the abuser has the financial power in the household. So if the victim wants to get out, they have to leave their household. So, which ends up meaning they go to a shelter, or if they can't find one, they do become homeless. One second. Okay, so I read some research from Angela Spiney, and she analyzed different sources of data, and one was reported from the Australian White Paper on homelessness, and it acknowledges that domestic violence is one of the main triggers of homelessness, and accepts that children are very vulnerable to trauma that becoming homeless brings, not just because of schooling and friendships that are disrupted, as well as other links to the community, such as sporting and cultural activities. So that's what I was saying before. Like, if a kid is on the baseball team and, like, now he has to pack up his stuff and leave, like, you're breaking that connection, and you're breaking his sense of community, and you're moving him away from that, stuff like that. But, yeah, like, it's so scary to think, but when you're living in these situations, like, home is the place of terror. It's not a place of safety. It's not, you do anything to stay away from home. I remember, like, and we can probably bond over this too, musical theater literally saved my life.
Yeah. Music in general saved my life.
Like, period. Mm-hmm. Music too. When I was going through this and I heard my mom and him arguing and screaming, I would go into my closet, put on my headphones, and sing. And then when I got a little older, I started doing musical theater, you know, middle school plays and everything like that. And I just loved it because then I could come home at 6 and not at 3.
Yeah.
And I
it's
was
an
just
escape.
like,
It's a beautiful
like,
world.
oh my God, like this is the best thing in the world. So I did everything I could to not be home. But yeah, so homelessness is another one. But so now I just want to talk about intergenerational effects. And so what that means are traits and disadvantages and disorders that follow one into their adulthood and creates a cycle of trauma for the individual and their children. So homelessness could be one. Criminal activity could be one. There's a lot of different effects from DV that follow your life, but not and your children's life as well. Also, like developmental disabilities, cognitive disabilities, behavioral problems, social disorder, you know, all these things that are long-term effects, they breed into one that live their life that way. And then, you know, you are who your parents are, really. Mm-hmm. Those are your first role models. So, you know, you pick up on what to do and what not to do from your parents. But when you're young, that's all you know.
I feel like you personally have probably been able to, I mean, like, you've definitely broken a cycle, you know. You know, and I think that's something to be very proud about. But I also think it's important to note that, like, I feel like a big part of you breaking the cycle too is you're into this. You study it, right. You went to school for it, and therefore you could see all the, you know, how important it is, right? For somebody who's not looking into it and not studying this, I can only imagine the other option to kind of break it is kind of going to therapy, you know? And I think, man, like I can't state how important it is to see a therapist and go through your traumas, and especially because there's a certain therapy, you know, there's things that are kind of therapy in of itself. For example, for us, musical theater, music in general, singing, and that could help us a lot with going through our own emotions as well, and even like sometimes even like acting in a play, you know, and seeing what the journeys that the characters inside the plays do, and something kind of reaches like your mind too, and since it's your therapy, something finally breaks and it's like, oh damn, look, no, that's not okay, you know. Even going to music shows, and there's so many different ways, but even like going to therapy itself, you know, going to a therapist and talking to them about your specific issues, I feel like it's not as easily as I almost feel like therapy in a certain sense is taboo to certain people still. Even like when I started going to therapy, my dad was like, why are you paying money to talk to somebody? Right. Just talk to a friend. And I was like, right. It's not that simple. No. I almost think of my therapist as my third eye. Yeah. You know, he helps me because he doesn't necessarily care about the friendships that I have. He'll just be like, this is toxic, and he's like, whether you like it or not, you need to see it for what it is, right? You know, do you know if there's any like free therapy or like do these organizations offer something like that for people?
I know they do. I don't know, like, it comes and it goes. I've seen the ACLU produce programs that offer free therapy to, you know, children living in certain cities or whatever it may be. The one thing that I must say is there are resources out there. It's just really hard to find them sometimes. And even for me, even with all this knowledge you may think I have, like, I still don't know 1,000% of the resources that are out there. So that's what I'm saying. Just ask around, call the hotline. They can help you, you know. You just have to be willing to take help from whoever you can get it from, really.
How common is like domestic abuse or even abuse in general between like teenagers? Because I think that's the only kind of age group we didn't touch up upon yet. You know, we talked about adults, we talked about young kids. Is it as common in teens, you know, and especially if they come from a household that has been through this?
I mean, yeah. That's why research says, like, we need to focus on teens, because they are at a point in their lives where they're going to go on the right or the wrong path. That's what happens when you're about 15 to 17 years old. That's when you're making your life decisions. So intervention should definitely focus on helping teenagers with just, therapy and family therapy, I must add, is even equally as important. But yeah,
Actually, I do have I have a question, because I remember from in your paper you talked about how you wanted to go to schools and like present like a program or something like that. What age group? Because I feel like I hate. There's a lot of fucked up things I don't like about the education system.
Yeah.
And I think there's things that they don't show early enough. Like, for example, I think sex education should be showed freshman year of high school. You know what I mean? I think the first time I ever got any type of sex ed or like the talk was like in 6th grade and stuff. Listen, I'm not saying like give condoms to fucking 6th graders, 7th graders, anything like that. But I also think like, kids are going to do what they do anyway. So you might as well educate them and, like put things out there. But especially for domestic abuse, what if you were planning to give a presentation to the school? Would you be giving it to middle school? Would you be giving it to elementary? Would you be giving it to high school? Because I almost feel like high school is almost, not that it's too late, but it's like, yeah, that's what it sounds like. And I feel like when you talk about this stuff, it's like parents would probably be like, oh no, save that for high school, because like, they're more mature to absorb it, But I remember some of the most critical stuff that I learned was, especially, at least for me, was especially during middle school. I remember, I'll never forget this one teacher. I forgot her name, from Little Falls, but she came out and she talked about how her son overdosed, and she found him. And I remember how impactful that was to me as like a child in middle school, and I felt like if I knew earlier, I'd be able to like, see the signs of certain friends that, because I have friends who have overdosed, and it sucks. Me too. And it's like,
I love you, Paola.
Child, her rest in peace, but like, man, like I guess I kind of go in a circle.
But it's the same thing. I think that we don't do enough with drug awareness. I mean, if you look at the 3 towns, we have a serious problem with drug use. And not only just smoking weed and whatever you want to do, but these are kids, young adults, kids that are dying from heroin, that are dying from hardcore drugs. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really think my education really prepared me for any of that stuff. I just come from a environment that has been full of alcoholism and drug use, so I always knew, okay, that's definitely not what I want to do, but everybody is not fortunate enough to have that. So I mean,
so like coming back, like what age do you think it's appropriate, or even like necessary to like tell kids, like this is something that happens and you could break a cycle, So
I definitely think there are different ways to speak about it to different groups. So to give an example, let's start with high schoolers. I would obviously go into depths about what is domestic violence, what are some red flags that you need to be aware of as a young person dating, that can, that can indicate somebody is of what nature. Also talking about rape culture and about, sexual abuse in college and date rape. And I mean, there's a lot of things that tie in with domestic violence that kids are going to experience in college. So those are some of the things that I would want to provide information to high schoolers. For middle school, I mean, that would be the basis of what is domestic violence, very definitional, not too graphic, but what we need to be doing at that age is be teaching what is right, what is wrong. And I heard a great TED talk, and I forgot who it was. It was this man, and he said, I don't understand why domestic violence is looked at as a women's problem when 90% of the abusers are male. And so I think the number one thing that I would do is just make sure both, boys and girls of young ages are included and participate in that conversation. And, it doesn't have to be as graphic. And as a parent, I do think, you should have a say in what your child learns and what they do not learn. But it's also important to have these talks with them at home as well, too. But I definitely think, you know, you have to be drilling it into their head when they're in middle school and they're going to be entering high school with no knowledge of you know, domestic violence and that you cannot hit a woman. And, you know, a lot of the things that are taught about domestic violence are so about physical abuse. And what I think really that we need to focus on is it's more mental and psychological abuse, along with financial abuse and social isolation. But you know what I mean? It's a spectrum of abuse, and you need to teach it all, because we need to understand the girls that are growing up today are not growing up the way that I did. And it's worse. And there's social media, and there's grown men trying to holler at these young girls so easily nowadays. And that you know, they have to be able to have the tools and the knowledge to protect themselves as well. So I understand what parents are nervous about it, but at the end of the day, one, your kids hear stuff from their friends, from their school, from this, from that. They're going to hear stuff regardless. That's number one. But two, you got to give them the tools to protect themselves. You have to. You have to. You have to. I always say it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So if you're doing it in age appropriate and easy to follow in simplistic terms, I think there's no reason why a parent wouldn't want their little girl to know, you know, it's not acceptable if a man does A, B, and C for me. And as you know, for a boy, I cannot do A, B, and C because I will go to jail and there's consequences for those things. Yeah.
Well, Bree, we are coming to like near the end of the podcast, surprisingly. Yeah. I know it goes super quick. Yeah. Is there any last topic you really wanted to get off your chest to just talk about, or just in general, or say anything in general?
Yeah, I just, if we can, I would just want to say what we can do to change domestic violence culture.
Yeah, of course. Please get into it. So
the first thing would be education. And that's what we were just talking about, so that's cool. Yeah, we have to raise awareness. And we have to be giving kids key information that can prevent them from making wrong decisions in their lives. And I really do want to teach young boys to not devalue women and to teach them that violence is never the answer. And I also want to tell young girls to never accept abuse and to teach them how to love themselves. And because a high self-esteem can be the biggest protective factor when it's coming to accepting abuse. The second thing would be child and family development. So we have to push for programs that actually benefit children, such as therapy and group family, group therapy, and to address all the underlying trauma that kids go through from experiencing domestic violence. And whatever that may be, if they, a lot of the times it might be resources things, they don't have clothes or they don't have food, or all this all ties in with, domestic violence definitely ties in with poverty violence as well. The third thing that we need to do is provide resources. So, in my opinion, I don't think our government does enough to address this epidemic that we have. We need more shelters. We need more shelters. Every shelter that I know is at max capacity, like year round. It does not stop. There shouldn't be a waiting list, Sorry. Yeah, because the most important thing is they need somewhere to escape to that is safe for them and their kids. The fourth thing is funding and policy change. So hopefully years from now, I'll look back on this video and be like, I did it. But one of my biggest things is I want to go to law school, and I want to work with the government to create grants. And if anybody doesn't know what a grant is, it's pretty much free money from the government that you don't have to pay off. And so I would create grants for victims of domestic violence to, like we were talking about before, move, rental insurance, rental assistance, healthcare, employment, daycare. There's so many things that these women need help with, or these victims need help with. So if you give them that financial power, you give that back to them, they have the ability to change their lives. And then the last thing is we need so much more research. So much more research. I mean, and even in my papers, like a lot of things that were cited were from research from overseas. We do not do any research in the domestic violence area in the United States. It's like, how are we not investigating this problem that we have? But we're completely ignoring it, basically. And with that research, we need to be using evidence-based programs. So we need to know what is working and what's not working. And we need to, stop giving so much money to programs and research that doesn't even change anything. We need to really reallocate where we're putting our money and making sure it's working, because nothing's getting better and we're just wasting money and taxpayer dollars, But yeah, that's about it.
I have 2 last questions for you.
Yeah.
First question.
Yeah.
What would you tell yourself if you could? What would you tell yourself with the knowledge you have now to your younger self when you were going through that period of time with your mom and her boyfriend and all that stuff?
Wow, that's an amazing question. I think I would tell myself, you will survive. You will thrive, honey. You can get through anything, and you will find the love of your life, and you will have the most beautiful little daughter in the world, and you will have the life that you always created. I mean, you always dreamed of, and no one can take that away from you. And if I didn't go through those experiences, I wouldn't be sitting here, and I wouldn't be the mom I am. I wouldn't be the future wifey that I am, I think that everything does happen for a reason. It's just so true, and it's so cliche, but I live by that. And I would tell her to follow her dreams, because we're almost there.
And here's the lead-up question.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your mom during that time?
Ooh. That's a hard one. I would tell my mom that I'm proud of her. That she is the strongest woman I know, even though she may not feel like it at the time. But in her heart, she will do the right thing. And just be strong. Be smart. Don't settle. That's a big thing. Do not settle. And that you will get through this. And once you're on the other side, you're never going back. And I'm just happy that she will or has made the right decision, because it's led me to live my life and her life. And I'm just really proud of her, and I love her a lot.
Awesome. Bree, again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was absolutely amazing. I think there's so many gems here that people could definitely use to change their life. I'm happy for you. I'm proud for you. And also, if you have anything you want to promote or say real quick, if you want to shout out your Instagram, or also you could also repeat the hotline number if you want to as well.
Yes, I will definitely do. Yeah, so the domestic violence hotline is 800-799-7233.
Awesome. And did you want to shout out your Instagram or anything? Or you don't have to if you don't want to. It's not a big deal.
I need your help. I need to create like a CJ Instagram,
Oh, yeah.
But right now I have, I will put my personal. It's at Briana Amico, at BRIAMICO. Listen, if you're listening to this podcast and you're going through what we talked about, hit me up. I am just a very good listener. I'm a very good friend. If you need advice, I will try to point you in the right direction. I will try to give you something to work with, and I'm just here for anyone that needs someone. I really am.
Awesome. And guys, you already know the business. Ayoo Chill, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, all of it. And yeah, I think that's all good. We're all set. Let's get the fuck out of here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming on, dude.
Thank you.
Awesome. And I usually just do a quick dap up so the camera can see her or whatever. Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Am I good? Am I good?
Not as bad. Not too
That was
bad.
good?
You did great. No, you did great.
No, that was so
That's
much
awesome.
fun. Oh my God, that was so much fun.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Oh,
Appreciate it.